This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
If I need batteries, I'm motion sensor. Huh? Give me 2 batteries. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. You know, in life, the more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm not a stranger to this shul. It's actually my in-laws daven here for the last, 20, 30 years. And they actually sit on this table. And when I come to visit for Shabbos, I actually stand right over here. So I'm used to this spot, although this is the first time I have the chus to speak in the shul. And it's tremendous Kiddush Hashem and quite overwhelming to see such a wonderful turnout of so many Nashim Tzidkaniyos who are Mevakesh Dvar Hashem. So I'm avarich all of you with continued Siyata Deshmaya, Simchas and Achas in your families, Ad B'Yas Kol Tzedek. So I want to speak today about a topic that is called the Birchas Yaakov. I was asked to speak about something substantial, not stories, but something in-depth related to the time of the year and the Parsha. And of course, the most prominent part of Parshas Vayechi is the Birchas Yaakov, as it's commonly known. I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I had to memorize the Birchas Yaakov, adding absolutely nothing to my understanding of it. I think I still remember most of it, although if you think about what the Birchas Yaakov is, it's very difficult to understand what it is. We know at the end of the Birchas Yaakov, and you should have 2 handouts. You have the Mar Makaimos, the source sheets, and also, for your convenience, I made for you just a copy of the Birchas Yaakov of the Psukim, so we could analyze them. So at the end of the Birchas Yaakov, it says, "V'zois asher dibra lohem avihem vayivarach oisam." This is what Yaakov Avinu said to them, and he blessed them. And Rashi's bothered. He blessed them. He didn't bless everybody. Reuven really didn't get a bracha. Shimon didn't get a bracha. Levi was criticized. Some of the Shvatim were just called animals. You know, like Yaakov Avinu went over to Yisachar. Hey, Yisachar, you're a chamor. A crouching chamor, right? Don, you're a snake. So it doesn't seem like Yaakov Avinu actually was mavarich all of the brothers. Yehuda got a few nice words. Yosef got some nice words. And yet Rashi points out, it says, Ish asher kiberchasai beirachoisam, that sort of everybody was included in the brachos that the particular Shvatim received. But what's most problematic with the Birchas Yaakov is that it seems like Yaakov Avinu is just giving random thoughts about his various children. So for instance, what is it? Is it a bracha? Is Yaakov Avinu blessing his children? You look at Reuven, all Reuven gets is, you need anger management, you're impetuous, you make rash decisions. What kind of bracha is that? Shimon and Levi, you're violent, you're scattered, you have no stability. What kind of bracha is that? Maybe it's rebuke. Maybe the Birchas Yaakov is not really brachos. Maybe it's just rebuke, maybe it's criticism, maybe it's direction. But Yehuda is not criticized. Yehuda is not given rebuke. Yehuda is praised. Yehuda is compared to the majestic lion. Is the Birchas Yaakov then prophecy about what's going to happen to the Shvatim in the future? Is it geographical information? Zevulun, you're going to live by the seacoast. Asher, you have very fertile land. The Birchas Yaakov is very confusing. There is no one thing that Yaakov Avinu seems to be doing. And if you look through the Mefarshim, almost none of the Mefarshim offer us one thematic approach to understand the Birchas Yaakov. So what I would like to present to you today is from one of my favorite commentaries on Chumash, the Abarbanel. The Abarbanel's thematic approach to what Birchas Yaakov is, which will absolutely revolutionize your understanding of this week's Parsha and of the family of Yaakov Avinu in general. Because the Abarbanel, if you look in your source sheets in number 4, the Abarbanel points out, in number 4 on the 3rd line, on the 2nd line, Ki efshir shenemar shahaya tachlis Yaakov B'tzava hazois lebanav elo le'echad midala tachliyos. There are one of 4 possible objectives that Yaakov Avinu was trying to accomplish in this week's Parsha. Either he was trying to give them a bracha, im shahayu b'derech bracha, or 2 lines down, v'im shahaya l'hoichicha, maybe he was trying to rebuke them, or v'im shahaya l'hoidiyam, or he was trying to teach them or let them know prophecy about the future, or he was trying to tell them about their future geographical location. And the Abarbanel goes through all of these 4 possibilities, and he summarily rejects all 4 of them. It can't be, says the Abarbanel, that Yaakov Avinu was merely giving a bracha. Ruvain did not get 1 bracha. Shimon did not get a bracha. Levi did not get a bracha. So maybe it's criticism. No, Yehuda was not criticized. Maybe it's geographical information about where they're going to reside. Zevulun will be on the seacoast. Asher will have fertile land. That can't be either. Nothing is said about Ruvain. So it's very difficult to understand what exactly is what's going on in this week's Parsha. It would almost seem like Yaakov Avinu is offering random thoughts to each shevet. Just imagine. Haga ba'atzmacha. You had a number of children, and you lined them up, and to the first one you said, hey pal, hey kid, you need to control your temper, you need anger management. And the second one, you should really move to North Dakota in the southwest region. And the third one you say, you're going to be an accountant. And the fourth one you say, your test score. It's just random information. There is no thematic approach, seemingly, to understand what Yaakov Avinu was trying to accomplish. Let's talk a little bit about Yehuda. Vayasur shevet Yehuda. Malchus will never be removed from Yehuda. What a beautiful pasuk. Is that true? Vayasur shevet Yehuda. Is that accurate? Kings will always come from Yehuda. What about Shaul HaMelech? Was he from Yehuda? What? From Binyamin. What about Yeravam ben Nevat? He wasn't from Yehuda. So how many kings did you have from Yehuda already? You had David, you had Shlomo, and then it already broke off. What about the Chashmonaim? What about the Hasmonean dynasty? The Ramban says that the reason why the Chashmonaim were killed out is because they took away Malchus from Yehuda. Yeah, but Yaakov Avinu said, Lo Yasur Sheva Yehuda. And what does it mean, Ad Ki Yavoi Shilai? That we're going to have kings until Shilai comes. Who's Shilai? Is Shilai Mashiach? So you're telling me we'll have kings until Mashiach comes? Right now Mashiach's not here, we don't have kings. When Mashiach comes, then we will have Malchus based David. It's just the opposite. It's counterfactual. Ad Ki Yavoi Shilai. It should say when Shilai comes, then we'll have kings. Let's talk a little bit about Yisachar. What in the world is Yaakov Avinu saying to Yisachar? You're a chamar? A boni chamar? Thanks a lot. How about Dan? Hey Dan, Sheifala, guess what? You're a nachash. Nachash alei derech. I think once Dan heard he was a snake, I don't think he cared. It was alei derech, tachas haderech, lamala min haderech. What exactly is Yaakov Avinu telling his children? To understand the Birchas Yaakov, we need to have a little bit of the historical background of this commentary of the Abarbanel. Who is the Abarbanel? Rav Don Yitzchak Abarbanel lived from the year 1438, Reish Tzadi Ches, to the year Kuf Tzadi Ches, to the year Reish Samach Ches. 1438 to 1508. Now it's not so well known. Everybody knows the Abarbanel as the great Parshan, the great commentary on Chumash. But the Abarbanel was a man of very regal stature. The Abarbanel was a general in war. The Abarbanel was the finance minister of Alfonso, the king of Portugal. And ultimately, in the year 1481, King Alfonso dies, and he's succeeded by his son Wa'o. And Wa'o immediately begins to execute all of his father's ministers. And then the Abarbanel gets a message that Wa'o would like to speak to him. And the Abarbanel's advisors tell him, Wow is not calling you to chazer over Masechta B'chayros with you. Wow wants to chop off your head. So the Abarbanel makes a mad dash, and he runs out of Portugal and he heads to Spain, being pursued by the soldiers of King Wao. He makes it just over the border as they were about to snatch him. And where does the Abarbanel come? He comes to Toledo, Spain. And he arrives in Toledo, and he begins to write his commentary. And he comes to Spain not at a good time. His acumen in finances was realized immediately, and he becomes the financial advisor of King Isabel and Queen Ferdinand. He helps build up Spain to be the world superpower, to the point where they are now primed for reconquesta, which means to retaking over the Iberian Peninsula. And in 1492, of course we know, upon being successful in chasing out the Muslims, we know the Muslims came to Spain in what year?
711.
Very good. Americans know the year, 711. And finally, in 1492, they're successful. And Vayomer HaMelech Belivoy, the Abarbanel says, if you want to know about the history of the Inquisition, you could read the Abarbanel's introductions to Sefer Yoshua and Sefer Malachim. And the king and the queen say to themselves, what could we do to show gratitude to our God other than to force those miserable Jews to accept the true religion? And they selected the date of Tisha B'Av, 1492, unknowingly, to expel the Jewish people from Spain. The Abarbanel had an opportunity to remain in Spain as a finance minister, and he tells the king, for me to remain, I need a minion. The king said, no problem, I'll let you have a minion. Abarbanel says, no, that's not what a Jewish leader does, and he went into Golos with, based on his account, 300,000 other Yidden. How many Jews openly remained in Spain? 0. Whoever stayed remained as a Marano, which is a derogatory term. And Abarbanel comes to a place in Italy called Corfu, and unfortunately he was working on his manuscript on Devarim, which he lost in his travels. And how is he going to be ever able to rewrite an entire commentary on Sefer Devarim? He comes to Corfu, and he actually met someone who happened to have copied over his commentary to Sefer Devarim, and he is able to recover his commentary to Sefer Devarim. Abarbanel wrote many svarim, was a prolific writer. By the way, unfortunately, at one point in time, Abarbanel went back to Portugal to advise the king in his finances. And at this point in time, Abarbanel had a grandson who was 1 year old. And the king of Portugal kidnapped him and baptized him. And Abarbanel never saw him again. And throughout the writings of Abarbanel, he never got over the fact that he lost his grandson forever. Many of the themes of Abarbanel writes a lot about Mashiach. He wrote a trilogy on Mashiach called Migdal Yeshuais. 3 volumes, Yeshuais Mashiachai, Mayani HaYeshua, Mashmi HaYeshua. Abarbanel comes to Italy and he sees something very strange. That there is something called rabbis. What a strange thing. What's a rabbi? If you look through Chumash, not Rabbi Moshe, Rabbi Aaron, there are no rabbis. Says about what's going on? Since when in Judaism are there rabbis? This is not authentic smicha. We know the authentic smicha had already ceased. The Abarbanel says the concept of someone calling themselves rabbi was actually introduced as a mimic to the Christian world, where they have doctirin or other professors, and the Jewish people, in order to sort of keep up with the times, had to adopt the clergy name. But Abarbanel never went by the title of rabbi. He comes to Spain, and he says to himself, I've wasted so much of my... To Italy. Good, you're listening. Very good. He comes to Italy, and he notices he has so much more free time on his hands, and he really regrets all the time he spent back in Portugal advising the king. He says to himself, I wasted so much of my life. And he coined the following expression. For those familiar with Gemara, there's an expression in Gemara called Chisure Mechsera V'hachi Katani, which means sometimes there'll be a question on the Mishnah, and the answer is, the Mishnah is missing words, this is what it means to say. But says the Abarbanel, sort of on a play on words, Chisurei mechsara. The less you have in life, the less money, the less possessions, the less assets, hachi katani, the more you end up learning. Says Abarbanel, when I was in Spain, I had the majesty of the palace, I had riches, I had fame. The only thing I didn't have was time to learn. And now that I came to Italy, I'm chisurei mechsara, I'm missing everything. But the one thing I'm able to do is vahachi katani, I have much more time to learn. Interesting, the year Abarbanel died is the year Reish Samach Ches, 1508. However, the Talmidim of the Abarbanel don't like to refer to that year as Reish Samach Ches. They like to change the Hebrew letters, Reish Samach Ches to Ches Samach Reish, Chasar, because they feel the pain of the loss of the Abarbanel. In fact, 5 days before the Abarbanel passed away, Rabbi Yehuda Mintz passed away, and they're both buried next to each other in Padua, Italy. I had the opportunity this summer to speak on a trip in Italy, and we went to the Beis HaChaim of the Abarbanel and Rabbi Yehuda Mintz. But I'm saving one biographical detail of the Abarbanel till the end of the Shiur that I'm not telling you yet.
Please tell us.
I know. You have to hang in there. So, the Abarbanel advances the following amazing concept. Says Abarbanel, Yaakov Avinu is sitting around at his deathbed. He's lying in his deathbed. And he sees his children, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. And all these children have different and disparate personalities and inclinations. And he's thinking to himself, this is the first generation. Just imagine, by the next generation, 12 kids, if they each have 12 kids. We're talking about a lot of grandchildren, a lot of great-grandchildren. They're going to be a nation. What will keep them together? How will they ever be one unified people? Says Yaakov Avinu, what this family needs is this family needs Malchus. They need a king. Says Abarbanel, what the Birchas Yaakov is doing is, this is not a correct terminology. It's not a bracha. Actually, the Ibn Ezra writes, it's a mistake to call it Birchas Yaakov. This is not a bracha, this is the formation of Klal Yisrael. And what Yaakov Avinu is doing is, he is going through his children, their personalities, their makeups, their geographic location, their natures, and determining who is fit for the job to be Melech Yisrael. And Yaakov Avinu starts naturally with his firstborn, Reuven. And Yaakov Avinu says, Reuven b'choyriyata, Reuven, you're my firstborn. You would have been the natural choice. Koichi v'reishis oini, you're my strength, you're my first power. You are my first koyach. You should have been the man for the job, and therefore, yeser se'es v'yeser ois, you should have had greater majesty. You should have had greater power. You should really be the Melech. One problem, Reuven, you're really a great guy, and I love you. But pachaz kemayim al toisar, you're impetuous, you're rash. I'm not criticizing you. I'm not pointing out a flaw. Sometimes a person has to be able to make a quick decision. I'm just telling you one thing. You're not fit for the job. You're impetuous. A king has to be deliberate. Sometimes a king has to be able to sit down and make a very deliberate decision. Like the Pasuk says, Melech b'mishpat yamoid eretz. A king has to use justice. He has to think things through slowly and clearly. Reuven, you don't have the personality fit for the job. I don't love you any less, and you're not less of a tzaddik than any of the other shvatim. You just don't have the personality that it takes to be Melech Yisrael. Whereupon Yaakov Avinu moves on. Shimon v'Levi achim. Shimon and Levi, your brothers. Meaning? No kidding, your brothers. We know that. Meaning the two of you have the same flaw in terms of not being able to be the Melech Yisrael. Why? Klei chamas mecheroiseyem. Your wares are wares of violence. What happened when you didn't know what to do with Dinah and Shechem? So you went in there and you obliterated the city, you dropped an atom bomb. You can't be the king. The king can't be trigger happy. The king has to think through things through clearly. Yaakov Avinu wasn't saying you did the wrong thing in Shechem. Maybe you did the right thing. Maybe you did what needed to have been done. But you can't have that kind of personality in office. You can't be the Melech Yisrael. Your personality, your hanhaga, your inclination is to do things violently. Now, sometimes we need that. Listen to what Yaakov Avinu does to Shimon and Levi. You know what Shimon and Levi would become? Not the Melech. They become the Rabbanim and Rabbeim. Says Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Kanos, zealotry, Mesiras Nefesh is what's needed to be a teacher. The children have to see that if there is any deviance, if there's any violation of halacha, the Rabbeim and the leaders don't stand for it. And they have to see that they mean business. And therefore Shimon and Levi became the Rabbeim in Klal Yisrael, the Malamdei Tinoikos, because they had the Kanos and they had the Mesiras Nefesh to stand up for the halacha. But they didn't have the personality to be a melech. A melech has to be deliberate. A melech has to think things through. If there's insurgents in a city, you can't just come and blow up the city. You have to know how to deal with it in a thought-out, proper way. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu says further, Achalakim b'Yaakov v'afitzeim b'Yisrael. Listen to what this means, says Abarbanel. Very interesting. Achalakim b'Yaakov means that Shimon and Levi, you don't have real estate. So what? What does that mean? Shimon, we know, his land protruded into the chilek of Shevet Yehuda. So what that meant was, Shimon did not have his own territory that he could call home. Levi also. Levi resided in the 48 cities of Levium. He didn't have land. And for a man to have confidence, and for a man to be able to sit back and make a thought-out decision, he can't be living in some apartment building. He needs to have real estate. And Shimon and Levi, you don't have the terra firma, you don't have the territory to be able to be a melech. This is not what you're cut out for. It's not criticism, it's not rebuke, it's not correction, it's statement of fact. Shimon and Levi, you're better suited being Rabbeim in Klal Yisrael than for being Melech Yisrael.
Yeah, but it says Or Apam, that's criticism.
Or Apam, your anger is cursed.
That's criticism.
It is what it is. This is what you are.
Yeah, good point.
It's just the meter.
This is what you are. You are what you are. This is it.
Yeah, he didn't say Or Ata. Or Apam. Your anger is cursed in the sense that it's not a midah that's acceptable for this position of Malchus. Otherwise, you're a great guy. What? A lot of questions. What? What's the punishment? Oh, so that's why I pointed out. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says that was actually a reward where Yaakov Avinu was channeling their personality, that they'll be scattered. In other words, the Levium will be among the rest of Klal Yisrael to be teachers as well as Shimon. You're asking good. If I avoid the question, it means I don't know the answer. So okay. So let's move on to Yehuda. Now Yaakov Avinu comes to Yehuda, and he says, "Oh, Yehuda, I think we have our man." And Yaakov Avinu then identifies the 4 qualities of Yehuda that render him fit to be the king. Now, at this point in time, I want to point out something in Parshas Vayechi. You know, Parshas Vayechi speaks about the Mechiras Yosef. And smack in the middle of Parshas Vayechi, I believe it's Revi, all of a sudden it interrupts the regularly scheduled broadcast of Mechiras Yosef to tell us the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Injected in the middle of the Parsha. In the middle of the storyline, Yosef's on the way down to Mitzrayim, and then after the story of Yehuda, back to the story of Yosef who at Mitzrayim. What in the world is the Torah doing, injecting the story of Yehuda and Tamar in the middle of Mechiras Yosef? Hold on to that question. So now we're identifying, says Abarbanel, the qualities of Yehuda. First of all, Abarbanel very wisely points out the phenomenon that often when someone is successful, there could arise jealousy. But among siblings, jealousy is most acute. Why is that? Says Abarbanel, because if you have two brothers or two sisters, they say to themselves, oh, wait a second. We come from the same father and mother. We come from the same womb. We have basically very similar personalities. And why do I not have what the other person has? So naturally, if there is going to be a melech from among these 12 boys, it would naturally awaken jealousy. So the first quality that we need to have a melech is that the other brothers need to accept the authority and majesty of this selected individual. And that's what Yaakov Avinu says, Yehuda, ata yoiducha achecha. Your brothers acknowledge your greatness. Your brothers praise you. They're not jealous, they're not angry, they're not bitter. They recognize your grandeur. That's the first quality needed to be melech. By the way, just as an aside, I'll tell you, a beautiful Chassam Sofer, since I see there's a very learned audience. Of course, one of the greatest descendants of Yehuda was David HaMelech. So let's see, who could name for me, what are the 4 Sfarim and contributions of David and Shlomo? So in 0.01 second, you already nailed them. Okay, good. Okay. Okay, 2 thumbs up. Very good.
Only 2?
You got it. You nailed it. So we have Tehillim, Shiurim, Koheles, Mishlei. Okay, so listen to this. Yehuda ato yoiducha. Yehuda, you will praise. What praise? Tehillim. Lo yasur shevet mi Yehuda. Rashi Tevois. Mishlei. V'lo yikehas amim. Koheles. What are we missing? Shiurim, huh? We got to find it. So it says the Chassam Sofer. Ad ki yavoi Shilai. Shilai is Rashi Tevois. Shir hashirim l'shloimai. All 4 Sfarim of the descendants of Yehuda are merumas in the bracha to Yehuda. So Yoiducha is Tehillim, Yikahas is Koheles, Yosef Shem Yehuda is Mishlei, and Shilai is Shir hashirim l'shloimai. The remez is how do you remember these 4 books? They are such sweet waters. They are such pleasant waters. The Nachal, Adonecha, Sashkem. Sashkem, Taf is Tehillim, Shin is Shir Hashirim, Kuf is Koheles, Mem is Mishlei. Well, that is the first quality that Yehuda has. The first quality is Ata Yoiducha Achecha. Your brothers acknowledge your greatness and superiority. Next, if you want to be a king, you have to have military prowess. You can't be afraid to go to war. Yadcha be'oyref oyevecha. You grab your enemies by the neck. You have the military prowess. You have the majesty. Number 3. But you're not violent. You're not rash like Shimon and Levi. Gur Aryeh Yehuda. You're like a lion cub. A lion cub is not vicious. It's gentle, like a cat. It's soft. You have the ability, despite your military prowess, to be soft and gentle when needed. Gur Aryeh Yehuda. But on the other hand, Gur Aryeh Yehuda, you also have the ability of Kilavi Yakum. You are like a mature lion, meaning you have endurance, you have stability, you have the strength in order to persevere as a melech. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu identifies the 4 qualities that are needed to be Melech Yisrael. And basically, Yaakov Avinu says, I think we may have our man. First of all, Yehuda ato yoiducha achecha. You do not arouse the jealousy of your brothers. Yodcha ba'oyref oyevecha. You have the military prowess. Gur Aryeh Yehuda. You're gentle. You could be soft, but at the same time, uchilavi mi yikimenu. You have the stability and endurance to be the king. But the problem is, what about the prophecy of Lo Yasur Shevet Mi Yehuda? Yaakov Avinu says there will always be kings from Yehuda. Kings from Yehuda? We didn't have kings until David. What about Shaul? What about after Shlomo? Yeravam ben Nevat. What about today? What does it even mean, Lo Yasser Shevet MiYehuda? And I'm going to tell you something that, in order to appreciate, you'll have to know some more biographical information about the Abarbanel, something that is very meaningful to me personally. Says the Abarbanel, it doesn't say Lo Yasser Melachim MiYehuda, it says Lo Yasser Shevet MiYehuda. What does Shevet mean? Staff of rulership, staff of leadership, Torah leadership. It doesn't say there will always be kings from Yehuda. It means the Torah leaders of Klal Yisrael will always come from Yehuda. So, let's look at the Shvatim themselves. When they wanted to kill Yosef, who's the one who stood up and voiced his opinion, which was respective? Yehuda. Ma betza ki nareg achinu. Who was the one who convinced Yaakov to send Binyamin? Vayomer Yehuda shilcha hanar. Who was the one who dealt with Yosef? Vayigashen lahav Yehuda. Which Shevet traveled first in the Midbar? Yehuda. Which Shevet's Degel led off? Yehuda. When we just leaned on Chanukah, on the first day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, which one of the Nesiim offered his carbon first? Yehuda. Nachshon and Aminadav, Lamata Yehuda. When they distributed Eretz Yisrael along Yoshua ben Nun and Eliezer Kohen Gadol, Kalev ben Yefuneh, Lamata Yehuda, you look through Nevi'im. Whenever Klal Yisrael is counted, they count the people and they count Yehuda separately. Why? Because of the prestige and the majesty of Yehuda. Says Abarbanel, Mamish Adavar Nifla. Throughout Golos Bavel, the leaders of Klal Yisrael in Bavel, the Reish Galusa, Shevet Yehuda. The Rosh Sanhedrin, Shevet Yehuda. Says Abarbanel, and I wish I had more time to go into this in depth. Sometimes I say you do, but this time not. I'm joking. Now Abarbanel says that in Spain, all the leaders of Klal Yisrael came from Shevet Yehuda and from David HaMelech. Say, really? Did you know the Rambam was a direct descendant of King David, David HaMelech, and Yehuda? Rashi was a direct descendant of David HaMelech. Ad hayom hazeh. Why? Because Abarbanel himself was Gezam Yibeis Yishai. The Abarbanel himself writes in many places he was a Ben Achar Ben, going back to David HaMelech. So this comment of the Abarbanel is not just something that he philosophized, it's something that is proven by fact. The Gedolei Yisrael throughout history have always come from Shevet Yehuda, and particularly David HaMelech, Rambam, Rashi, Maral, and the Abarbanel himself always referred to himself as Nagid Umitzaveh Me'geza Yishai.
Well, what about later, all these other years since those people?
And throughout history, the Gedolei Yisrael, for the majority, come from Shevet Yehuda. In fact, the Abarbanel argues on the Ramban. The Ramban says the Chashmonaim were wiped out because they usurped the Melucha from Yehuda. Says the Abarbanel, no, not true. Even in the times of the Chashmonaim, the leader of Klal Yisrael, there was, he writes, if you look at the end of number 12, Tamid hayu b'Yushalayim nogid miYehuda v'huya rosh Sanhedrin l'kayim ha'shenemar lo yasor shevet miYehuda. So this is borne out by historical fact. Rabbi Glatstein, if you don't mind, the Abarbanel moves on then. After Yaakov Avinu turned to Yehuda, he then went through the other Shvatim, and he is up to Zebulun, and he says, Zebulun, also, your mamish zisu yingala. Here's the thing. Zevulun l'choif yamim yishkain. Zevulun, you live by the seacoast. So what? Says Abarbanel, Zevulun was a merchant. He's a businessman. And that's wonderful and that's terrific. And if that's your talent, that's what you need to do. But a king can't be a businessman. Just imagine, somebody came to pay homage to the king, and he's about to kneel down, and the king whips out from his thing. He has watches in his thing. You want to buy one? It's not becoming. It's not becoming of the king to be interested in business deals. Now, somebody comes to the king for some kind of political issue, and the king says, by the way, I have a great deal. I'll tell you about it afterwards. It's unbecoming of the king to be involved in schira. So therefore, Yaakov Avinu says to Zevulun, your talent and your skill is in business, and that is not something that would be able to be reconciled with being Melech Yisrael. One of the very difficult psukim in Parshas Yaakov is at the end of Dan, you have the pasuk, one of the shortest psukim, if not the shortest pasuk, Vishuascha Kivisi Hashem. What in the world is that doing? What, he's saying Krish Malamita? What, he's saying Kiddush Levana? Why is he saying Vishuascha Kivisi Hashem? Why doesn't he throw in, Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom, David Melech Yisrael? What's he doing? It's like random tefillah in the middle of the bracha to Dan. Says the Abarbanel an amazing thing. Yaakov Avinu turns to Dan and he says, Dan, you have two qualities that really make you somewhat eligible to be Melech. First of all, Dan Yadin Amai. You're a judge, you're level-headed, you could determine the correct outcome of a halachic decision, and you're powerful and you have military prowess. Yehi Dan Nachash Ali Derech. But there's something slightly lacking in both of them. Firstly, Dan Yadin Amai. And I like this pasuk because I say this pasuk every day. My name is Daniel. So Dan Yadin Amai Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael. You could judge, but the only thing is Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael. You're ordinary. You don't judge them in a way that shows your superiority above all of them. You're just one of them. And to be the king, you can't be one of the guys. You can't be Ka'achad Shiftei Yisrael. You have to be Lamala Meha'am. And secondly, Yehidan Nachash Alei Oirach. Listen carefully. Yes, Dan, you're powerful and you could defeat your opponent, but not like a melech. When a melech wages war with an opponent, it's Beroiv Am Hajas Melech. It's open warfare. It's not fearful. It's not cowardly. Oh, king doesn't try to ambush the enemy and knock him off the horse from behind and get him when they least expect it. A king goes to battle. He lets the opponent know, I'll meet you tomorrow in broad daylight at 12 o'clock. I'll be there with my men and we'll destroy you. But Dan is clever. Dan is sly. Dan is underhanded. That's wonderful. But that's not how a melech operates. A melech operates in a more head-on, more majestic, with more grandeur. And therefore, Dan, you don't have the type of salvation that a melech would bring. We don't hope for your type of salvation. You know what type of salvation we hope for? Lishuascha kivisi Hashem. Now, what does Malchus Yehuda have to do with the salvation of Hashem? Listen carefully. Tira Shem Yehuda v'tira Neflais. Think about the word Yehuda. What's the word Yehuda? Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's the name of God. Meaning, Malchus Beis David is the embodiment. Malchus Beis David is the chariot to God in this world. When David HaMelech went to war, it was God going to war. And if you're waging war on behalf of God, you can't knock over the other guy's horsemen from behind as a coward. You have to go frontal attack. You have to head on. And therefore, we listen to the word Yehuda. Yehuda is Yud Kei Vav Kei. But even more importantly, Daled. What is a Daled? The Daled is the fourth leg of Hashem's Kisei. The first is Abraham. The second is Yitzchak. The third is Yaakov. But nothing holds up God's throne like David HaMelech. That's the Daled. That's the name Yehuda. Says the Shlach HaKadosh. That is why when Yehuda is born, what does the pasuk say? Vata'amoid miledes. A lashon of Amida. He fortified the throne, the Kisei HaKavod. Therefore, Yaakov Avinu says to Dan, you bring salvation, but not the type of salvation that the Rebbeinu Shalom brings. And therefore, Yaakov Avinu says, Lishu Ascha Kivisi Hashem. We hope for the salvation brought through Malchus Beis David, which is the salvation of Hashem. Abarbanel continues, God, you don't have it either. God, Yigudenu. that means that God was the first one of the Shvatim that were carried away by Sancherib Melech Ashur. What Yaakov Avinu was saying is, you don't have the strength and endurance. You're going to be the first to be carried away. As opposed to Yehuda, the only Shevet predominantly, besides Levi, that we have today, is Yehuda. Yehuda endured the bitter galus more than any other Shevet. A little bit of Binyamin as well. How about Asher? Yaakov Avinu says, Asher, you're a baker. You have a very fertile land. V'hu yitain madane melech. In other words, you're not going to be the king. You're going to bring treats to the king. The king is not a baker. You, Asher, you're going to bring the treats to the king. That's what you're cut out for. Naphtali, ayola shlucha, hanoise nimrei shafer. Meaning, Naphtali, you're a swift agent. You could get things carried out quickly. You're a good speaker, imrei shafer. You're an articulate speaker. You could carry out missions for the king. You could speak on behalf of the king. But you don't necessarily have the strength and the endurance and the grandeur and the majesty needed to be Melech Yisrael. Yosef, you almost had it. You could have been the king. But, here's the problem. Ben Poiras Yosef, Ben Poiras Ale Oyen. Yaakov Avinu goes through all the milas of Yosef. Ben Poiras, you overcome your Yetzer Hara. You overcame temptation. You have mighty inner strength. Ale Oyen, you're generous. You supported me. You supported your whole family in Mitzrayim. There's just one thing you were missing. And that is Vayimararoihu varoibu. The brothers were jealous of you. Sometimes you have someone in the family that has ability and has authority, and they command the respect of the other siblings. For whatever reason, Yosef, the brothers did not appreciate your malchus. They were jealous of you. And for you to be the melech, you would not bring unity to your brothers. And because of that, Yosef was not zoicha to be Melech Yisrael. And we'll discuss that in our ending. Binyamin also. Binyamin is the Eiv Yitroif. The disqualification of Binyamin was, if a king, every time he goes to war, he's after the spoils and he's after the booty, and he's just, let me hang around here just a few more days to collect a little bit more, also unbecoming of the king. So the Abarbanel, really in a masterful exposition of the Birchas Yaakov, that says Abarbanel, Birchas Yaakov is not blessing, it's not criticism, it's not nevuah, it's not rebuke. The Birchas Yaakov was establishing the future of Klal Yisrael. So you may ask, why is this transpiring at this juncture of time? Why at this juncture of time is Yaakov Avinu making Yehuda the Melech Yisrael? And I just want to share with you one concluding thought from the Shlach HaKadosh to just tie this all together. It says the Shlach HaKadosh, Yehuda was the king, but actually, does anyone here know who reigned as Melech Yisrael longer than anyone in history? Yosef. Yosef was king in Mitzrayim from age 30 to age 180 years. Not David, not Shlomo. Nobody ever reigned as long as Yosef. So how is he allowed to do that? And that brings us to a whole other topic. That's why the brothers wanted to sell him. Still, okay. That's one of the reasons the brothers sold him. Because they felt he was usurping Malchus from Yehuda. But in reality, there is a historical phenomenon. And understanding the different roles between Yosef and Yehuda. And that is, Yehuda is always the Melech, but Yosef is always the foundation. He's the Yesod. The Midah of Yosef is the Midah of Yesod. What Yosef does is, he takes disparate people, and he creates a nation. And once we're a nation, then Yehuda takes over as Melech. This is a historical phenomenon that replays itself again and again. We were in Mitzrayim. You had the 70 family members of Yaakov Avinu Mitzrayim. Yosef reigned to make us one, to make us a nation, and then the kingdom was handed over to Yehuda. And that's what's going to happen in Asad Lavai. You have Mashiach ben Yosef, and you have Mashiach ben David. Yosef forges us into a nation, and then Yehuda reigns. It says the Shema HaKadosh, this is alluded to in the words of Yosef. Vayishlacheni Elokim lefnechem, lasum lachem she'iris ba'aretz, ulahachayos lachem lefleito gedoyla. It's the end of Parshas Vayechi. Yosef says, don't sweat it, don't worry. The Rebbeinu Shalom brought me here, listen carefully, first that I should be she'iris. She'iris is a lashon of shirayim, which implies just crumbs. And then he says, Lefleita Gedoyla, the great salvation. Well, what was it? Was it a she'iris or was it Lefleita Gedoyla? Says the Shlav, this refers to the two epic periods of history where Yosef set the stage and then Yehuda took over. The first one, of course, was in Mitzrayim. Yosef made us a people. And then Yehuda, B'tzeis Yisrael mi Mitzrayim, Beis Yaakov me'am loyes. Once we were Beis Yaakov, Haysa Yehuda l'kacha, Yehuda took over. But that was only she'iris. But la'asad lavai, then Yosef HaTzadik will make us into a people, and then Mashiach ben David ultimately will redeem us. That is why, says the Shema HaKadosh, if you look carefully in Parshas Vayechi, as Yosef is going down to Mitzrayim, simultaneously the Torah tells us the story of Yehuda and Tamar. Who came from that? Peretz, Zarach, Oived, Yishai, David. As Yosef is going down to Mitzrayim, Rebbeinu Shalom is forging and preparing that Klal Yisrael should be a nation. Simultaneously, Rebbeinu Shalom is also preparing Malchus Beis David. And this is something that the Abarbanel says is apparent in our Gullus today. That the Torah leaders of our people, in general, come from Shevet Yehuda and David HaMelech, as the Abarbanel himself was, as we said Rashi was, the Rambam was. I have a family tradition. My grandfather has a tradition. He comes from Rashi, from David HaMelech. Many, what? Kemat, most of Klal Yisrael today. Most of Klal Yisrael today comes from Shevet Yehuda. And when you see Gedolei Yisrael, Rav Elyashiv, Chaim Kanievsky, this is what Abarbanel is saying is the kiyum of the pasuk. La Yasur Sheva mi Yehuda, we should taka v'zoicha ad ki yava yishilai shvizoicha tigul shlema. I want to thank Mrs. Goldman for inviting me to this wonderful gathering. I want to thank my friend Mrs. Rosenthal also for giving me the opportunity to come here. And I wish everybody here bracha v'hatzlacha, happy Yaskayel Tzedek, Meher Yameinu, Amen. Really? Really? Which paragraph?
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. What?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.